This is Robbers Cave State Park, the most popular camping destination in the state of Oklahoma. For decades, Robbers Cave has attracted people from all over the US thanks to its beautiful vistas and numerous on-site activities. This was the case in 1954 when 11 boys enrolled for that year's Boy Scouts of America summer camp. The boys spent the first 6 days of camp getting to know each other and performing various cooperative tasks in order to establish a bond between them. During the 6th day, the kids were asked by their counselors to pick a name for their group and paint it on t-shirts and flags. The boys chose the name Eagles. However, unbeknownst to them, in a different part of Robbers Cave, there was another group of 11 boys, the Rattlers, who had gone through the same bonding exercises. And unbeknownst to both groups, their supervisors were in actuality psychological researchers, conducting an experiment which tested the validity of the realistic conflict theory. This theory states that intergroup hostility, along with feelings of prejudice and discrimination, arise as a result of conflicting goals and competition over limited resources. What followed the group formation stage were 4 days of intergroup competition. A series of competitive activities were arranged, with prizes being awarded to the members of the winning team. As expected, competing caused friction between the Eagles and the Rattlers. In the beginning, it took the form of verbal antagonism, but soon escalated to physical violence, with the Eagles burning the Rattlers' flag and the Rattlers ransacking the Eagles' cabin as retaliation. After the competition stage, the researchers tried various means of reducing animosity between the two groups. At first, their efforts took the form of simple reconciliatory opportunities, such as the showing of a film or the shooting of firecrackers to celebrate the 4th of July. Nevertheless, those opportunities did not lead to any observable lessening of tensions between the Eagles and the Rattlers. As a result, the researchers introduced problem-solving scenarios that offered substantial rewards to the two groups, but the attainment of which was beyond the efforts of one group alone. For example, the boys came across a truck that was carrying food for both groups and needed to work together by pulling on a rope to get it unstuck from the mud. The joint pursuit of such goals saw a lessening of intergroup conflict and helped eliminate any prejudice between them. The two groups of boys might have been introduced to each other as enemies, but on the last day of camp, they rode the bus home together as allies and friends. Human beings casting their differences aside to pursue a common goal isn't news. Thousands of years before Walter White visited Hector Salamanca's nursing home to offer him a chance at revenge, the Greek city-states put an end to their conflicts and banded together to stop the Persian expansion into mainland Greece. Perhaps the most important unlikely alliance in human history was the one that took place during the Second World War. On New Year's Day in 1942, representatives from 26 countries, along with US President Franklin D. Roosevelt, signed the Declaration by United Nations, formalizing the Allied countries who would oppose the Axis. At the forefront of this treaty were 3 countries: the United States, the United Kingdom, and the Soviet Union. The 3 powers rarely saw eye to eye on a wide array of issues, but their common enemy was enough to pull them together. Sure enough, thanks to their joint efforts, the tide of war had shifted to the side of the Allies by 1943, and the leaders of the 3 countries decided to meet in person for the very first time to discuss how they would close out the war. So on November 28, 1943, Franklin Roosevelt, Winston Churchill, and Joseph Stalin arrived in Tehran. It was in the Tehran Conference where the 3 powerful men became collectively known as the Big Three. Whatever your walk of life might be, I'm sure you've come across this term before. Big Three is still used today in a wide range of topics, such as television, anime, cars, astrology, and sports, long after its original meaning has faded away. This lack of meaning is extremely apparent in basketball discourse. Every fan of the NBA can give an example of what is and what isn't a Big Three. But explaining why or coming up with a concrete definition of what constitutes a Big Three is a far greater challenge. But what if I told you that the answer lies in plain sight, and it has done so for the past 40 years? The 80s were a revolutionary decade for every aspect of life and above all for entertainment. This decade oversaw the launch of MTV, the production of countless Hollywood blockbusters, the birth of the video game industry, and the rapid run of Hulkamania in the World Wrestling Federation.
What you gonna do, Macho Man, when the whole world full of Hulkamaniacs destroy you?
On the other hand, the National Basketball Association entered the 80s in steep decline, as the league was coming off its toughest stretch to date. The absence of a clear-cut dynasty, combined with a divided talent pool between the NBA and the ABA, significantly decreased fan interest and almost killed professional basketball altogether, until two college students changed the fate of the sport forever. While the series between the Supersonics and the Suns attracted the least amount of viewers in NBA Finals history up to that point, the 79 NCAA Finals between Irvin Johnson's Michigan State and Larry Bird's Indiana State became the most watched basketball game ever. Over 35 million people tuned in to witness the genesis of the historic rivalry between Magic and Bird, with that year's most outstanding player prevailing 75-64. Even more success was on his way, however, as only a year later Johnson won the NBA championship with the Lakers, grabbing the Finals MVP award in the process, the only player to do so in his rookie season. The other Finals team was Julius Erving's Philadelphia 76ers, who beat Larry Bird and the Boston Celtics in the Eastern Conference Finals. It was apparent that despite Bird's instant rise to basketball superstardom, the Celtics would need to surround him with more than an aging roster to become actual title contenders. Thankfully for Larry Bird though, reinforcements didn't take long to arrive in Boston. Ahead of the 80-81 season, Celtics GM Red Auerbach, in one of the most lopsided transactions in history, traded the number 1 and number 13 pick of the draft to the Golden State Warriors in exchange for Robert Parrish and the number 3 pick, which was used to draft Kevin McHale. The rest, as they say, is history. Parrish and McHale were the perfect complementary pieces to Bird, and together formed the greatest frontcourt trio in all of basketball, thus thrusting the Celtics into a new dynasty, the Big Three dynasty. From 81 to 87, the Big Three achieved 5 finals appearances, 3 titles, and countless individual accomplishments. In addition, the battles against Showtime helped steer the NBA away from obscurity and into the mainstream. But perhaps the most enduring piece of their collective legacy is the establishment of the concept of a basketball Big Three, the nucleus of which is of course the superstar, a generational talent with superhuman basketball skills and an insatiable appetite for success. The archetypical superstar is also a leader on and off the court, who gets the most out of those around him and establishes the team culture. As such, he is the primary predictor of a team's championship potential. From the era of the late great Bill Russell until the present day in Steph's Warriors, the common denominator between every dynasty has been the presence of a once-in-a-lifetime superstar. You get the point. Now, let's talk some numbers. In the context of a Big Three, there are 2 requirements for a superstar: a 5 offensive box plus minus and a 0.2 win shares per 48 minutes. Fulfilling both requirements over the course of a single season, like Bird did multiple times, is undoubtedly a historic achievement. However, it doesn't guarantee championship success. Just like nobody would watch a full season of Jim Takovic going about his everyday routine, regardless of the quality of acting by Bob Odenkirk, it takes more than great individual performance to win in the NBA. Specifically, it takes an equally as great supporting cast. The second and third best players of a Big Three rarely share the same role offensively. Robert Parrish might have been brought in as the number 2 to Larry Bird in 1980, but the rapid rise of Kevin McHale, first as a six-man and then as a starter, meant Parrish had to take a backseat to both Bird and McHale from 1994 onward. For a player to qualify as the second option in the Big Three, he must have a 3 offensive box plus minus and a .18 win shares per 48 minutes, while for the third option, an offensive box plus minus of 1 and a .15 win shares per 48 minutes are necessary. Lastly, the 3 players forming the Big Three should collectively account for at least 70% of their team's usage rate. Is this definition arbitrary? Absolutely, but it is extremely useful in identifying Big Threes past or present. even the ones rarely talked about today, like the Jazz Big Three of Malone, Stockton, and Hornacek from 1994 to 2000, whose 343 to 127 record together, along with their 2 finals appearances, have faded to obscurity because of his earnest. Overall, according to this definition, there have been 11 Big Threes dating back to 1980, having a stranglehold over the league ever since. In the 43 seasons between then and now, 25 of them have had a finals featuring at least one team with a Big Three. However, in that aspect there is an outlier among the group of 11. While the first 9 Big Threes are responsible for a combined 31 finals appearances and 17 title wins, the 2 most recent ones haven't even come close to contending. Dissecting the failures of the 2021 Nets and Lakers feels like opening a Pandora's box, as there are a myriad of reasons behind them. Nevertheless, I believe they can mostly be attributed to 3 primary factors. The predominant narrative of the 2022 playoffs was Steph's ability to carry the Warriors to their first championship in the post-KD era. In fact, his play was so superb that it casted a huge shadow over the performance of the remaining roster. The Warriors had huge contributions by their role players, including smothering perimeter defense by Gary Payton II, explosive scoring by Jordan Poole, rim protection by Kevon Looney, and deadly three-point shooting by Otto Porter, not to mention Klay Thompson coming back from 2 catastrophic injuries as good as ever, and Andrew Wiggins being doubtlessly the second best scorer on the floor throughout the whole playoffs. It is thanks to those players overachieving their roles and contract values that the Warriors were able to make a deep playoff run and eventually win the big one. According to Basketball Index, since 2014, no finals team has featured less than 3 above average offensive players and 3 above average defensive players, the exceptions being the 2015, 2017, 2018 Cavs and the 2020 Lakers. Pretty much at one point, having LeBron James make a finals appearance for his team no matter what. But those days are over, and LeBron doesn't have the help he now needs. The 2022 Lakers had just 2 above average attackers, LeBron and Malik Monk, and only 1 above average defender, Anthony Davis. Exactly like the Nets, who after trading James Harden to Philadelphia, remained with only KD and Kyrie as above average offensive players, and in the process received their only above average defender, Andre Drummond. It can be debated whether Rob Pelinka and Sean Marks cared too little or too much about the opinions of their superstars, as I'm sure the Westbrook and Harden trades had LeBron's and Kevin Durant's full backing respectively. But the bottom line is that both GMs failed to construct championship-level rosters around their top players. Most of the acquired pieces over the past season didn't fit, didn't play, or flat out just were not good enough, particularly on the defensive end, which brings me to the second factor. What is a coach's job? To get the most out of his players by instituting offensive schemes that suit the roster's strengths and getting everyone on the same page about the team's defensive identity. In short, a team should be an extension of a coach's personality. This is especially evident in well-coached teams like Eric Spoelstra's Miami Heat and Nick Nurse's Toronto Raptors. These 2 teams have consistently outperformed expectations and preseason projections without any superstar-level talent. Instead, their backbones are players drafted late in the first round, in the second round, or even gone undrafted. In Toronto's or Miami's system, everyone gets involved on offense, with each player getting touches and having a well-defined role. Likewise, on defense, teamwork and communication is key, as Coach Nurse and Coach Spoelstra aren't afraid to bust out the occasional zone coverage. But for every overachieving success story, there is also an underachieving disappointment. As already established, last year's Nets and Lakers both lack defensive-minded players, particularly on the perimeter. Even so, there is absolutely no excuse for being as bad as they were. From January 1st until the end of the regular season, LA and Brooklyn were tied for the 5th worst defense in the league, only behind teams that were actively trying to lose games for a chance at a higher draft pick. Both the Lakers and the Nets looked lethargic and discombobulated on the defensive end, often missing assignments or getting blown by for easy baskets. The lack of communication and individualism found on defense were also apparent on the offensive end, as Frank Vogel and Steve Nash resorted to running isolation to appease their superstars. Lots and lots of isolation, with both teams in the top 3 in frequency last season. While this your turn, my turn mentality helped the top players get their numbers, they certainly weren't efficient, and it also eliminated any chance for the raw players to find their rhythm. Overall, the Lakers and the Nets looked like collections of players and not actual teams, with most of the blame for that lying with their coaches. Everyone had their own agenda and was afraid to step on anybody else's toes, even when somebody was out of line. With no culture and no example to follow, both teams desperately lacked chemistry, regularly getting involved in petty drama. The constant absences surely didn't help with that either. There are very few things people hate more than getting stuck in traffic on their way to work, an experience which over the last few years has become more and more frequent. In 2022, the average American spends 27.6 minutes on a one-way trip to work, a 27% increase from 1980. Things are even worse in New York, where the average commute time is 34.7 minutes. This means that it actually took longer for each of the 3 Nets superstars to reach the Barclays Center on game day than the time they actually shared the court. Throughout the whole 2021-2022 season, Kevin Durant, James Harden, and Kyrie Irving played together for just 32 minutes. Altogether, in the 392 days that James Harden spent as a Net, he started only 10 games alongside KD and Kyrie, until Harden finally had enough and demanded a trade to Philadelphia in exchange for Ben Simmons, who wouldn't fare much better either, as he missed the whole of last season, resulting in the Nets Big 3 2.0 never actually taking off the ground. Now some of that is injuries, but as much as they suck, they're still a part of the game, and one that you cannot control. So what the Nets and James Harden blamed instead was Kyrie being Kyrie, meaning stubborn and, in the words of Stephen A.,
one of the most delusional athletes in American history.
And from one team with a delusional point guard to another.
Have you ever seen a more delusional athlete in your life than Russell Westbrook?
At least the Lakers had to worry only about the on-court issues of Russell Westbrook, as out of the Lakers' Big 3 he was by far the most durable. LeBron James missed 26 games and Anthony Davis was unavailable for more than half the season for the second straight year in a row. Many role players missed significant time as well, forcing Frank Vogel into a never-ending lineup experimentation. Thus, the Lakers were the only team in the league with no lineups playing more than 90 minutes. To put it into perspective, the Nuggets and Suns starting lineups played 761 and 754 minutes together respectively. With all these underlying issues, disappointment for the Lakers and the Nets was inevitable. In 1848, French journalist Alphonse Karr wrote in the July edition of his monthly magazine titled The Wasps that the more things change, the more they stay the same. 173 years later, he is once more proven right. Following the disastrous 21-22 season, both teams looked for drastic alterations, with the Lakers firing the first shot.
Frank, right at the end of the game, Adrian Wojnarowski tweeted that the Lakers are going to be firing you, a decision they'll let you know tomorrow. Have you communicated with the front office at all about your future? And I guess what's your reaction to hearing that?
My reaction is I haven't been told.
Coach Vogel was then replaced by former assistant Darvin Ham. But this was only the beginning. In the next couple of months, both franchises underwent major changes to the makeup of their rosters. The Lakers first added youth and then some much-needed perimeter defense in the form of Patrick Beverley, while the Nets added some serviceable wings and brought Ben Simmons back from his injury. The stage was set for both teams to start with a blank slate, prove their doubters wrong, and compete for the ultimate goal, the NBA championship, is what I would say, but I'm afraid None of this happened. In an eerily accurate reenactment of last year, the two teams had a very slow start to their 22-23 campaign, with Steve Nash paying for it with his job in the Nets front. And like Frank Vogel, he was replaced with his former assistant, Jack Vaughn. This, however, was far from the only organizational turmoil Brooklyn had to face. Kyrie Irving is still being his, let's just say, idiosyncratic self, while Kevin Durant doesn't seem too thrilled with his team's roster, just 4 months after asking to be traded away. Nevertheless, he deserves tons of credit for carrying the Nets to a 500 record without Kyrie, and with Ben Simmons being a shell of his former first-team All-Defense self. Speaking of 500 records, that's not even close to where the Lakers are, and that's because of their awful offense. The Lakers are second to last in offensive rating and have the worst team 3-point percentage not just this season, but in league history. In addition, Father Time seems to finally have succeeded in slowing down King James, who not only gets injured with a higher regularity, but also doesn't look as dominant as earlier in his career. His downward shift in production, however, has successfully been filled by Anthony Davis, who's playing the best he ever has in the purple and gold. Him finally embracing being the man in Los Angeles would be the lone glowing star in what appears to be a lost Lakers season. In the ever-evolving landscape of the NBA, the last two big threes come across as relics of the past, destined to perish and be succeeded by smarter, more efficient ways to build a championship contender. With no time to adapt and no discernible way to compete with the league's top teams, this season marks the end of the Big Three era, 33 years after its genesis in the Boston Garden. But after every ending follows a new beginning. And if you ask me, the future looks incredibly bright. Hit the music.
Westbrook for three with 1/10 of a second. Thunder on the high side. Danny Green long. D! What a play! Showtime! James Harden, a flamethrower!
The top of the list of offensive options, but that was well done.
Simmons, they left him alone, and he punches it home. Irving and Curry, one-on-one. Irving puts it up. It's good! Kyrie Irving from downtown! Here is Durant for the win! Kevin Durant!